Howdy, all you delicious people. Thank you, anybody who watched the very first episode of this, the very first review of this. And so recently it just had me deciding, like, well, if anything, I could probably go and keep watching this and kind of like see where this heads. To me, like the first review I'd mentioned, like this kind of comes off as like a werewolf kind of show. It's very viciousness, it's very gritty, and so on and so forth. I think in these four episodes, like we have to kind of do like a little bit of legwork of actually getting to know stuff about these vampires. We have to see them in their most difficult environments, and we also have to we also have to see like the technical side of things, but also we also get to see like the mushiness of it all. We get to see the relationship between the two main characters, uh, you Yuki and Tara or Tyra. I still haven't really gotten used to any of the names yet. So within four episodes, I'm still going like name. So we introduce some characters here within this show right away. We end up having a Johannes Kleeman, who is introduced here right away within these four episodes, and like it seems that he'll be a consistent tying to Yuki through a bulk of this episode because it seems that this guy has some kind of knowledge and much more so than I think Yuki does. And so we also get quite a bit of time here where we have the relationship between Yuki and Tara's relationship kind of tested to its otherwise full fledging degree. To where really we have both of these characters kind of questioning, like, well, are we dating? Are we together? Are we so on and so forth? To eventually where Yuki, eventually, whenever he is given a sedative, ends up asking Tyra uh, or Tiara. I don't know how it's pronounced still. Um, he ends up asking her to kiss her because the sedative is on, and so recently Tara can go, and I'm just gonna call her Tara. If it's ill pronounced, I apologize. But she ends up kissing him when he's on sedatives, and it's kind of really interesting. So, with that said, really interesting episodes, but also there are, of course, quite a bit of episodes to get through. There are quite a bit of events going on. Well, like, I think that compared to the original X amount of episodes that I watched, like through those episodes, there was a lot less going on. I think in these episodes, there's like they're ramping up for there being like, oh, okay, well, we gotta like put more in here to get more people intrigued because eventually they're gonna just wander off at some point and just be like, nah, I don't really care for this show. But with that said, let's go into I think just the spoilers of these episodes. Uh, reasonably, yeah. Like I don't know how exactly I feel about this show. There's kind of like this kind of back and forth that I feel about this show. Like at first, like oh my god, like interesting action sequences and like an interesting story development and really kind of showing how dangerous these vampires are. Where in these episodes, I'm like okay, kind of the technical side and like now we have to have like a whole like every little bit of everything that these vampires are do like can and are having the ability to do, then like they have to showcase that and so on and so forth. And so it's just kind of like even though there are good action scenes, quite possibly to counteract the whole like, hey, you're gonna need to know a lot more about these vampires. Um, yeah, that's all that I really want to say for this cryptic like sense of these episodes. So let's get on into that double five territory to go into spoilers about this episode. So spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. So we end up having in this episode 4, we end up having a sniper that seems to want to go and kill vampires, like just any vampire. It seems like this sniper is on the loose to just kill any number of vampire-ish like creatures, and so we end up having Yuri that ends up getting caught in the crossfire of this sniper-ish like person, and so we end up having Yuri getting so wounded that we have this Kleeman character coming into the fray to give him blood to have him heal his wound, or otherwise uh, he would die. So we end up having Yuri completely caught off guard by getting this true blood. And so we have Yuri who goes into this like rampage, and we end up now having people like scrambling to uh try to like calm this guy down, because eventually we have it to where Yuri ends up taking out the. Eventually, they end up taking down this sniper, and also having to basically take down Yuri. To where eventually they have to like tranquilize him and all kinds of things. And we had it to where Kleeman is having to explain to these detectives like why Yuri's on such a rampage. And because he's like, well, hey, I just gave him blood because it was supposed to heal like his wounds, like as if this guy was nothing, like as if like giving this guy blood was nothing. And it's like, well, no, dude, like this guy hasn't gone without blood, and so you're giving him blood, and so that's the reason why he's on a rampage now. So we end up having some of the other vampire like detectives trying to take down Yuri, and eventually they end up like trying to tranquilize him and all kinds of things. And so we end up having we end up seemingly having Tara, who eventually ends up seemingly leaning on Neely for information, because she actually doesn't know anything about vampires really. And so we have it to where Tara is going to this Kleeman character, this white-haired, long-haired guy, and like really trying to ask him. It's like, well, like, is it possible for like vampires to actually drink blood? Like, is it uh, like like what is to just kind of like happen with all of like the like what is the difference between a pure blood and a not so pure blood? Like what kind of demon is Yuri exactly, and so on and so forth. So like Tara is asking Kleeman all of these questions, and so we eventually have it to where Tara is going to go to Yuri with this information to just like, well, hey, uh, like I just got this download of information from this guy that seems to know a lot more than you do, and so like, hey, like maybe you should find a lot more about vampirism than you do, Yuri. So we end up having it to where there seems to be within the next episode, we end up having a news reporter just doing her usual broadcast, and so we end up having seemingly uh, a like a killer of sorts ends up going and uh, attacking someone on live TV. So we end up having the police force noticing that everyone is becoming all vampires and they're all like bloodthirsty because they've either seen this act on the TV or like they were in this environment of which that this attack had gone down. And so we end up having the human detectives all being out there trying to take down all these vampires and try to tranquilize them and try to take them down and whatever. Uh, and we have uh, all the vampire detectives are all going to have to just sit this one out because the people do not want them to all just start like changing and being in control because of either blood or just the situation that has gone on that would cause them to want to change. But we eventually have a gas mask that is going around with all these characters to uh, have them hide the smell of blood and also to be able to change and they also changed like the lenses of the gas mask so they wouldn't be able to see that that is actually red, of course, blood. So we end up having these characters. We end up having Kleeman, who seems to be perfectly fine around blood because he tends to drink small portions of it. I have to pause here for a second. Okay, so we end up having Yuri, who is to go out with Kleeman, and so the entire time Yuri is wearing a gas mask that is to prevent him from being able to uh, really see blood or smell blood. So we end up having Yuri going out and trying to take down some of these vampires, and we end up having it where Kleeman uh, is trying to make it so that way Yuri, even when his gas mask lenses end up breaking, Kleeman is consistently telling Yuri that it's not actually blood, it's actually ketchup or some other kind of food product, to where Yuri kind of is trying to think in his own head, like, oh yeah, like, I guess it isn't blood. Like, I guess it is something else. So we have it to where Kleeman is really telling Yuri like some of the stuff that he has learned, and you can just kind of tell that Yuri is just kind of disinterested, and then eventually when later on Yuri is or Yuki, I mean not Yuri, Yuki is confronted by Tara about this information, and that it seems that Kleeman had talked to Tara about some like relationship stuff that vampires go into and stuff along those lines. Yuki comes back to Kleeman just really upset about how like Kleeman is seemingly prying way too far into this guy's life, and to where we end up having a an argument between Yuki and Kleeman because we have it to where Tara is giving and mentioning all this information that Kleeman had mentioned, that Yuki is like, well, none of this is actually anything all and really and truly like tested. Like this doesn't exactly seem 100% true. And so, because we have it to where Yuki is mentioning, or Tara is mentioning to Yuki that supposedly vampires can live much longer if they drink small amounts of blood over time. And Yuki is like, well, that's not exactly been tested, and so on and so forth. And so we end up having eventually that Tara is saying, like, well, like, I think it's time for you to drink a little bit of my blood over time so that way you can get a tolerance of it, and then plus you could live a lot longer, because I guess vampires that try to go without blood live a shorter lifespan. And so we end up having Yuki eventually finding out that one of the police officers that is in this precinct, which I believe his name is Cairo, or Kirio, Curio. I guess that's the way I would pronounce it. Curio is a detective that is going to has really been driving a wedge between vampires and humans within this detective agency. And it seems that his thing was to eventually get a demon hunter to go after Tara, so he can separate Yuki from this woman. And to where eventually this demon hunter ends up going and retrieving she ends up going and retrieving Tara to get to like Yuki, kind of thing. So we have it to where Yuki ends up having to like kind of bring in this detective, and we end up having, because this detective, we end up finding out is like all kinds of involved in some kind of like rebellion or like anarchist act to try and like rift the whole existence of humans and vampires like living as one together, and so on and so forth. Ba 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 ba. So we end up having it to where towards the tail end of this episode, we end up having Yuki ending up like kissing Tara at some point when he ends up needing tranquilizers. But then we end up having Yuki ending up accepting the fact that Tara wants him to drink a small portions of blood, and so we end up having Yuki ending up accepting that and drinking little bits of blood over time. So, in the next episode, a bulk of this next episode is realistically just having Tara get kidnapped by some demon hunter woman of sorts. And so we end up having this girl kind of really asking Tara about her relationship with Yuki, and how, like, if they're like really boyfriend and girlfriend kind of thing or not, or like, and how exactly does she not know, and so on and so forth. Kind of like real questions of like really cementing this relationship through this episode. Uh, we have it to where Yuki had tried for several days to just try to distance himself from Tara, because we have it to where Yuki is like having dreams about drinking her and all kinds of things, and so we end up having Yuki um, trying to stay away for a while, because it seems that Yuki is probably just really in love with Tara, and so we end up having him distancing himself, and that's where Tara ends up easily getting kidnapped by some demon hunter, to where again she's asked all these questions, and to where eventually we end up at the end of all of this. Yuki ends up getting his woman, and everything is all resolved towards the end of this. And so, uh, we end up at the very tail end of this review. We end up having an episode where now, like, even kind of Tara, after this whole debacle, she is to really ask like Yuki if they're really dating or not, because it seems like Yuki has been very distant, uh and I think Yuki has really been distant because he was really falling for this girl. And so we end up having it to where in this 8th episode, really we have a focus uh, of Yuri and Tara trying to like make love together. And so we end up having it to where of course these two can't do the act without a like a doctor next door, like listening in on everything and so on and so forth. And so we end up having these people like starting on into this act, and we eventually having like Yuki like pull out, let's just say, to where we end up having it to where like the doctor is going like, oh no, like we've had cases before where we've had certain vampires get restrained and stuff like that, and I guess that could be a way of a vampire actually being able to be with a human and making a child together. But I guess we end up having it to where the doctor really trusts Yuki, and uh, we end up having it to where Yuki is going without restraints, just like seeing where this all goes, and eventually we have it to where eventually like Yuki is having this like what I would call like this Bruce Banner moment where his like heart is racing and pumping and whatever, and so they only get to a certain aspect of this, and then eventually it's called. So really that is a bulk of what really like actually happens within this last episode. Like it's kind of very lovey-dovey, and uh, there isn't a whole lot going on within this 8th episode. So yeah, really that's where this all heads into. And so yeah, so really, I don't know, I'm kind of intrigued about this show, but like I also like I kind of don't really care for the whole like vampire researching thing where we have to find out so much information about these characters, especially the vampire characters, and like how we have uh, these kind of dream sequences or stuff along those lines. Like it kind of gets to me going like, man, I can't wait till they actually go back into the normal like fray of things, like how they were doing, where Yuki was just surprising people and just be like, haha, like I got you, you're a vampire, and like you're doing heinous acts, and I'm gonna get you kind of thing. Whereas in these episodes, it's more like, okay, like we have to figure out who done it, kind of thing, and we also have to uh, figure out how to uh, get this situation going. So, with that said, I think that's all that I have to say about these 4 episodes. I kind of rushed through a lot of it, and I just kind of like, there was some details here and there that I kind of just rushed through because it was just. I don't know if there's interest still in this review past the point of this first episode. But on top of that, like, yeah, I had waited a while to come back to this, and I also just kind of like I was like, well, yeah, like I should review this, right? And I just kept like putting it off, because I ended up watching the episodes, and then I just ended up like going like, well, yeah, like I should review this, right? And then like I kept just like delaying it, and so like so I was just kind of hesitant about one, whether people would still be interested after the first episode review. But then after that, like I was kind of curious, if I'd be able to remember all of this and be able to review it and so on and so forth after that first review. And then I've been waiting a while to watch this and review it and whatever. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. If you guys want me to continue to review this, I will. More than likely. Yeah, just luckily, my memory sometimes is luckily a steel trap, because there's a lot of these movies that I'm reviewing that have a lot of details in them, and plus this show, like kind of has this kind of like 50-50 split about details or not details. Like it was, uh, like this is a very interesting show. And so yeah, I think that's all I got for you today. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.